lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is a Freight Coach podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines, but most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. I'm just going to jump right in. I got a very special guest who's coming back on the show. It's funny because there's so much time that goes between when we talk and when I have him on, and then he puts up another great post and I'm like, dude, I got to get you back on, man. We got to break some of this stuff down. So I got my man, Kevin Hill with Brush Pass Research back on the show. So Kevin, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. It's always fun jumping on the show, Chris. It's always a good time.
Dude, I agree, man. And so how's Texas? Because you've been out in Dallas now for a few years, right?
Yeah, a couple years. Texas is hot in the summer, and it's flat, and it's okay. Dallas is okay.
Dude, it's like I'm so excited because here in Arizona it's supposed to be a high of like 95 this weekend, or like it's starting to come up, and like there is no greater sense of relief when you live in the desert than when you can see the overnight low of starting to dip into the 60s, and you're like, oh, thank God, it's done. It's like the bulk of it's past.
Yeah, I went outside in shorts the other night, and it was kind of chilly. And I was like, oh, this feels so good. I can't wait.
Oh, man. So, dude, what's been going on? I mean, the post that I was referencing is it was like 19 consecutive months of a reduction in freight broker authority in the industry. Is that what it was?
Yeah. 11.6%. We've been trending, in the mid 11s for the last 2 or 3 months, year over year growth. I think a couple months ago, we hit that 3-year. It's not year over year, but that 3-year growth turned negative.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're down to about 3 or 4% less freight brokerage authorities today than 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many total authorities are out there then right now at it,
just over 26,000.
Just over 20. Jesus, man. That's but again, I think like one thing that, especially when it comes down to the data aspect of it, out of that 26,000, how many of them actually had revenue coming through, right?
That's a good question. And that's the real question out there. If you look at the top 3 or 4,000 freight brokerages, that accounts for about 90 to 95% of all the revenue.
Yeah.
So, most of those are dormant. They're not really doing any business whatsoever. What percentage that is, you can just take your guess, but they account for a fraction. So say last year, $135 billion of gross revenue. Only about 10 billion of that comes from that long tail of 26,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 10 billion of that?
Yeah, 10 billion. So 10 billion spread around, say, 20,000 MC numbers that are active.
Gotcha. It's, because I see a lot of this, and I think I almost wonder how much of it, and then again, you do that breakdown in revenue, like out of that 26,000, how many of them actually make over $100,000 in revenue and stuff like that. And I think like, and I bring a lot of this up because it's super easy to get an MC, and a lot of people are buying authorities and everything else. But and that's why I like seeing a lot of the data breakdown of like, all right, who's actually moving freight out there compared to what data is being presented. Because, when you sit here and say, 26,000 freight brokers, like, yeah, that seems like a lot of registered freight brokers. But I also look at it as real estate agents too. How many people hold a real estate license? But and out of that percentage of them, how many are actually making money doing it?
Yeah, it's a very few and far between, right? So if you take, let's say the top 5,000, right? There's probably 5,000 brokerages that are full-time businesses out there doing a million or more in gross revenue year in, year out, providing, an income. Everything else is either part-time, like the real estate agent gig, right? It's either part-time or it's dormant, really inactive, not really doing much business at all.
Mhm. How I mean, and that another thing too I'd like to see is out of all of those, how many of them are, been in business for a year or less? How many of them are just, like how many of them lapse within the first, 6 months and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a high percentage, really.
Uh-huh.
I need to get back and do some more research. I did some maybe late last year about, because during say 2020, late 2020 to 2022, there were 25,000 new MC numbers printed or issued, right? And by the time I really started my analysis, there's only about 9,000 of those that were still active,
Uh-huh.
right? And the average lifespan of those newly created brokerages were cut in half, right?
Mhm.
So from about, I think it was 3 years to about a year and a half, was the average lifespan for any brokerage created after, say, 2020. I have to go
Do
back
you
to my research to get the exact
Yeah.
numbers, but it was cut in half, right? So you saw a huge rush of people coming in. 25,000 new more MC numbers created during that 2 year window than there were active before that. And only 10,000 of those survived up until about a year ago, right? And
Yeah.
that number has been cut down significantly from there. Um, if you look at just a normal trend of 6% growth year over year from 2017 to right now, we should have about 1,800 more brokerages
Mhm.
based on that trend than we have right now. So we're seeing a culling of what we can call those dormant MC numbers that weren't really businesses.
Yeah. I think that I personally feel like at this point, I think that there's going to be more of that. I would even qualify it as a mass exodus of freight brokers
Oh
in
yeah.
the industry here. I would say over the next 12 months because at least through 2025, I won't be surprised. And I think there's a lot of different factors out there. For one, I think that from a overall freight market perspective, and I'll break this down into a couple of things. The overall freight market perspective, outside of a major shakeup out there, I don't see it changing in 2025. I think everything that's going on right now is going to remain. I think that there's some stuff going on the East Coast ports. Like if the union goes on strike, that could inject some life into the market because it's going to cause some disruptions and stuff like that. I thought what was possibly going to happen in Canada with the Canadian rail strike. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
that might be a positive sign because then all of a sudden a lot of the capacity dries up. I'm looking for anything to change up from how things are currently going, but that was avoided. I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the union out there. And on the ports, I wouldn't be surprised if that gets avoided because we're kind of cutting it close to the election here in November, and some of these groups that are aligning with certain political parties. You can't have a stain on the campaign if it goes on that they shut down the port, because that just gives the
Mhm.
opposition ammunition in their approach on things. But so I truly don't see anything changing at a magnitude that would quantify a major bump in the market. And then again, this isn't going to turn into a broker's market. This is going to turn into a driver's market. Customers are going to get more and more pissed off at brokers for service failures because they're going to want to keep their rates the same. Brokers aren't going to be able to, and carriers are going to charge a higher price. That's going to lead to a service failure. And then the biggest non-talked about point that is out there that I think is going to lead into a broker mass exodus is the fact that receivables are aging at a very high rate. Like there's a lot of people, and I see, some of these larger companies that are going
Mhm.
under, for example, like a couple weeks ago out of Nashville, that pretty large broker, I
Yeah.
forget the name of it. I don't know anything. I want to be abundantly clear, but I also know that not everybody pays their bills. Okay. Like as a business owner, not everybody pays their bills. And sometimes you got to fight for that. And then when times get tough out there, people extend their credit, they extend their pay terms. And then on top of that, banks start to rescind their credit lines to people as well. So it's like there's a lot of economic factors that are going on behind the scenes that aren't being talked about outside of where's the freight market heading. Like there's a whole fucking business out there, you guys, that's beyond cold calling. And those are some very major contributing factors. And I wouldn't be surprised if that affects trucking companies as well here.
I will. It will. And I agree that there's no impetus for the market to turn or to bounce whatsoever. So 2025 will probably be much like 2024. We've found a bottom most likely, but we can roll across that bottom for years. I just don't see, and strikes are usually short lived.
Yep.
Just like hurricanes are short lived. But there's nothing economically that's really in the forefront. There's really nothing out there that you can pinpoint and say, yeah, the market's going to turn because of this. You can talk about an exodus of supply, which is important, but that's not going to move the needle. You need something big, something like the pandemic, right? Or ELD regulations, or something that will move. And those are hard to predict anyway, right? That's the election might have a little bit of a boost, but the consumer is still out buying. They're defaulting at higher rates, which is worrisome. We still haven't really had a recession, right?
Yeah.
And that's got to come at some point.
Yeah. We've kind of side skirted that. And, because, you want to talk about credit card debt, I'm pretty sure is at an all-time high in the United States right now. Delinquencies are at an all-time high as well. So we kind of are at that tipping point, right? Like we really are at that inflection point. Again, I'm not an economist. I went to public school. As I like to say often, I went to public school, but I can read. And I just kind of like, it's got to give eventually in one way or another. And unfortunately, I don't see it trending in favor, and if you're looking at it right now, like with new home building, for example, that's at an all-time low right now, right? Like a home building, a lot of construction, because like I prospect primarily in the open deck world, and I talk to equipment places literally every single day. And the general consensus that I'm getting out there from a lot of the people that I'm talking to is, hey man, this is the slowest we've seen it. All right. We don't even have freight right now for our current providers, let alone bringing on a new provider on top of that to try. Like we just don't have anything. And I'm hearing more from them to call us back in 2025 than I am from the dry van people that I'm going after who are like, hey, call us in 30 days, stuff like that. Yeah. So there's a stark contrast out there on modes. Again, this is just a little bit of business development that I'm doing. This isn't everywhere. This isn't applicable to everyone, but the feedback that I get from somebody who actually cold calls shippers out there, that's what I'm hearing, man. I'm getting way more pushback on the open deck side of it. And it has nothing to do with what I'm saying. It has everything to do with the fact that their businesses are down.
You see that. And I haven't paid too much attention to the oil. But that just seems to be humming along at whatever rate that is. There's nothing in the prices of oil that should shock anyone or move the market in any way on the open, especially on the open deck side. So it's just like business as usual. It feels a lot like 2019. 2019, after the big bounce in 2018, coming down in 2019, nothing in the market really told us that it was going to switch, and it took all hell to break loose to actually move that market. Now, hopefully, it doesn't take that to move this market. But yeah, I mean, I don't see any new regulations coming down the pipe. I don't see anything to really constrict capacity the way that you need to constrict it to see a bounce. And I don't see anything in the demand side that is going to take off anytime soon to swing an imbalance that we're all hoping for, right? We can all talk about if we need it or not. I mean, we need it. Does the economy need it? Who knows? But we certainly all want it.
Yeah, I think that the hesitancy out there about even spending money, and the ability to spend money is dwindling, right? So it's like
Mhm.
there needs to be some form of injection to ease people's fears of that, right? Because it's like, I'm just thinking out there, worst case scenario for certain business owners where their receivables are aging at a higher rate right now. The banks are like, hey, we're not extending you any more credit that's out there. If they have a line of credit that they utilize to say pay their payroll every single month, right? Because they got to balance that out. Because in a perfect world, you guys, everybody pays their bills, but in the real world, you might have net 30, but people don't pay for 45 days, and you got $100,000 in payroll due on the 1st and the 15th or whatever that looks like. So you have to balance that out. Now that line of credit from the bank might be cut in half.
Yep.
So how are you going to do that? And then you're looking at layoffs and everything else. So there's a major trickle down effect that starts to come from this. And I think that, especially inside of our industry, there's so many other factors that play into this as well. And I actually saw an article from TT News that came out. It was this morning, and that it was that ATRI finds that truck drivers are detained on 39% of deliveries. So, again, you look at the trickle down effect of that. If they're detained on their delivery, they're not offloaded, they miss out on their next opportunity. And then brokers are handing out do not uses right now like fucking band-aids, and, and
Yeah.
so it's these people, they're just like looking to get these carriers shut off, essentially for anything. And it's like all of these factors that are coming into play is, I think that that's leading to, I don't know if it's going to be a complete free fall where it's just like, there's just so many people who just say, fuck it and hang it up at once. I don't know if that's going to happen. And, so like from your perspective though, with the data and the research that you follow, is it increasing at a decent rate? Is there any signs that shows like, hey, fucking more people are quitting right now than were, say, 3 months ago?
I mean, I no, not really. I mean, I think it's been steady. It's been steady. It's been up and down a little bit, but on a like a 12-month average, it's pretty steady. Just people, and it's kind of like they're not renewing their bond or their insurance, and they're letting that lapse and they're getting out. But it goes back to the drivers too. A max exodus of drivers. Well, where are they going to go? We just talked about construction slow. Oil is oil, right? So there's not a real bump up of that. So where are they going to get jobs at? I mean, so while driving a truck isn't quite as profitable as it was a couple years ago during a bull market, it's still a living, right? It's still a
Yeah.
living. You still make it.
Tim brings up something here that I'd like to get your take on this. I'll gladly say my take first on this because it's kind of a hot button thing. That the only any thoughts on the need for subsidies and rate regulation? That's the only long-term solution that seems to resonate. And my opinion on this is we do not need the government in our shit any more than they already are. And the last thing that what's not talked about is if there's a minimum, there will be a maximum. So if say you're, with that minimum, you're making $10,000 a month for whatever. And then, but now there's a new maximum where you can only make $15,000 a month. But if, then the that's just until your cost of goods rise, because like anytime that's out there, I'm just such a firm believer in the free market. I am such a firm believer in the way that things are right now. No, it's not fair to everybody at any given juncture that's out there, but business is hard. All right. And the last thing you need, in my opinion, is the government coming in and saying that this is the floor, but they will ultimately come in and say that this is a ceiling on top of it. So you will never make more than that.
It's a very good point, right? You go back to regulation, and then you had deregulation in the 80s. Have wages improved that much? No, not really. But does the government need to step in and do that whole experiment again, which was kind of a nightmare. I would never say, hey, the government should step in and regulate this. I tell you what, in a market like this, some piece of regulation that kind of constricts capacity or productivity will move the market, right? So you have that two sides of that coin, right? It's just like
Yeah.
the ELDs back in the day, right? It was a meltdown, disaster, and for about 9 or 12 months, we were all rocking and rolling
Yeah.
until it came down. So are regulations good? No, but always look out for new regulations that come in because it's going to disrupt the market a little bit.
Yeah. I think that, I truly think a lot of what we're kind of facing right now in the industry, I think the biggest issue facing the transportation industry is the FMCSA does not do their job at all. They don't monitor anything at all. The reason why we are here is because of their lack of doing anything. Like, how is fraud so rampant, right? How are you able to just buy 15 MCs and formulate 15 companies and then just bump from one to one to one to one, and then you close up and you go out of business and stuff like that? I think like there's just, and this is honestly why I don't think that they should get involved at all, because they suck currently. All right. The Department of Transportation doesn't do their job right now. The FMCSA doesn't do their job right now. What makes you think that they're going to do more with more power? I personally think that the Chevron ruling that came about from the Supreme Court, that is the biggest event in the small businesses' favor that could ever happen, because the last thing we need is bigger government. Honestly, the last thing we need, the more unchecked powers that are out there.
And that's interesting. We go back to the FMCSA, right? And not doing their job. Their job was set up in the 1980s when deregulation was occurring. They really haven't evolved at all. And just like most government agencies, they can't respond quickly, right? Or they don't respond quickly, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because fraud is the biggest thing that's going on right now. And it is something that, certainly worrisome to everybody. But even that's, well, I mean, I say even that's not moving the market, but that's really the biggest thing out there. And, how do you stop the fraud? God, who knows?
I think fraud is, I don't want to say it's overblown, but I think like it's one of those situations that it's all of the talk that's going on right now has had a bullwhip effect of where now everything a carrier does is under an absolute microscope. Like, the driver sneezed, fuck, he's put out of business. We can't have that, because it's put such an overemphasis on it, where, again, I'm not saying that it's not a problem, because, it is, but like freight theft has gone on forever. And it's going to continue to go on because, unfortunately, the criminals don't care about the law, you guys. It's kind of why they're criminals. They will do whatever. I truly think, though, that it has gotten to the point where it has made it like where a carrier can't do anything without getting shut off by somebody, and it's going to be the next thing, right? It was inspections. Now it's going to be something else. What's the next thing that's coming? It's going to be their safety score. Your safety score is at a 16, and we need it at a fucking 15. So therefore you're blacklisted and all of that stuff. Right. So it's just one thing after another. And I think it's just constantly spinning its wheel, and it has everything back down to the fact that the governing agency of our industry doesn't do anything. They want to have more listening sessions and talk than take more fucking action.
Yeah. They don't do anything for fraud, right? It's mostly, safety and, inspections and safety and that type of charter, I suppose. But once you get out of that and you get into cyber crimes and, wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, they're powerless to stop any of that, right? You almost have to come in with federal employees, the FBI, to come in and investigate that. And usually the crimes aren't big enough to attract the federal attention.
Yeah,
and
but
the bad actors are hard to hunt down.
Yeah, they're big enough.
Unfortunately, it's just getting overlooked.
Yeah, I know it really is, and they're big, but they might not be big enough for the feds, but they're big enough to put people out of business in the real world, right?
Yeah, in the real world, they are. Yes,
I also kind of look at it like this. Like, I mean, at what point though is that's not our job? An unacceptable answer from the people who we fund through our taxes, right?
Mhm.
Like at what point is that's not our job? Talk to somebody else, and then it turns into that's not our job. But it's not like these are instant replies, right? Like
Yeah.
this is 6 months. Oh, fill out this form. It's another
Yeah,
6
yeah, yeah.
months and everything else. So it's like I just think that there's too many people that have taken a hands-off approach here. And we just need actual things. Like we need the people who are supposed to be regulating the industry actually doing their jobs, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that's why people are able to come in and do what they do and then go away unseen because there's no repercussions for any of these actions, right? Like
Yeah,
you said it best right there, Kevin. Oh, it's
that's
not a
when
big enough problem. Okay, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to steal $50,000 17 straight times under a different authority, and then I'm just going to go away because it's not nobody's problem.
I know, right? I mean, you have government agencies and the like who are set up to regulate X 30 years ago. Well, the world has changed dramatically in 30 years, and they're just not capable of handling Y, Z, A, B, C, D, because there's all these new threats out there, and they're just powerless to even do anything about it. Because you're right. It takes 6 months to a year to even decide to do anything about it,
Yeah,
and then it's another 2 years. And if you're looking at law enforcement, right, this is, I don't know how much of an organized crime wave this is, right? But you're talking about 2, 3, 4 year investigations
yeah.
to handle a conspiracy charge against maybe the people who are funding it.
Yeah, I think that it's way more highly organized than anybody wants to admit, and
Yeah.
but again, I just kind of yeah, I think though that with those are from my perspective, that's what's driving why things are the way that they are, right?
Mhm.
Because there's so much phantom rates that are going on out there. The amount of drivers that I mean, I could only imagine the amount of drivers that unreport all of this stuff as well, right? Because
Yeah.
that's a whole other underbelly that goes on where drivers, out of fear of repercussion, they don't report any of this stuff, right? And then
Mhm.
they eat that loss and all of the phantom loads, all of these stolen loads that we're talking about here as well, Kevin, and the redirected loads that go to these other
Yeah.
warehouses and stuff like that. The carrier who actually hauls it, who's the real victim, they lose everything. That load, that revenue might have been the
Mhm.
revenue that kept them in business, and now they just lost everything for it. So again, I'm
Yep.
always going to talk about this stuff, man, because like I actually care about the little guy, and I want to continue to talk about this because like not everybody has a slush fund of millions of dollars to eat these losses from fraud and stolen freight.
You're talking about the drivers, so the brokers who are double paying for these
Yeah.
loads, and a lot of the fraud out there, which is the amazing thing about it, or the interesting thing about it. A lot of these, we're talking about stolen loads, right? Well, stolen loads, one thing. We're talking about loads that aren't even stolen, right?
Yeah.
They're I don't even know what to call it, but it picks up on time, delivers on time, but the carrier gets stiffed.
Yeah.
The
Oh
broker
yeah.
pays who he thinks the carrier is.
Yep.
Right, then the shipper gets involved, and that's when it is just a complete mess.
Yeah. No, dude, it is, right? And again, it's just like it's just kind of out of hand out there. And it's I think that those are, for my opinion, man, those are like always going to be the biggest issues that are
Yeah.
facing the industry. And we got a lot of problems to fix, but we need the people who are supposed to be fixing them to actually fix them and stop with the listening sessions. I think we've had enough listening sessions at this point. Let's just fucking take action,
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
well, hey man, I appreciate you joining me as always, Kevin. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about everything that you guys are doing at Brush Pass?
LinkedIn is the best way, right? I'm always on LinkedIn. You can just message me anytime, or you can go to brushpassresearch.blog, and that's where all the free research is. And then the website with the database is brushpassresearch.com.
No, I love it, man. And yeah, we'll I just think that pay attention to the data, you guys. Pay attention to the data. It's out there. It's telling a story. To at least from my perspective, I don't know. I don't think anybody's 100% confident on what's going to continue to happen, but I do know that no matter what, you just got to control your controllables out here. And but that will be it for today. I think we got a solo show tomorrow and a guest on Friday, but we'll be back tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network sees value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you